I want to start tonight by telling you the story of Lori and Chad Daybell, the so-called Doomsday couple. This is a couple where I think you have to understand the relationship to understand where they are now and what they are facing inside of a courtroom. These two, when they met, were both married, and both of their spouses subsequently died, okay? We kind of know how one died, the other one's a little more questionable. But these two came together, and it really became a love affair for these two, so focused on one another, and it just became about them. But I want to go back in time now, so you can have a clearer picture under what circumstances that they actually met one another. Melanie Gibb is or was one of Lori's best friends. And she was there when all this was happening, when Lori met Chad. Take a listen.
Do you have a recollection when Mr. Daybell and Lori Vallow met?
Yes.
And you were present for that meeting, is that correct?
Yes.
And was that in Arizona?
No. As you recall, I said St. George, Utah.
That was on the 26th of 2018 in St. George. That's correct. Okay. And again, the October 26th at St. George, did that have religious overtones as well?
Yes.
And that was also somewhat sponsored by the LDS Church, is that correct?
Not by the church, by individuals.
Okay. But the theme of that was consistent with what your religious faith is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And are you telling me that on October 26th, Mr. Daybell was there as well?
Yes.
And Mr. Daybell, do you recall what his topic was at that time on October of 2018?
Yes, he talked about the different visions he had of what he saw was going to happen in the last days.
He was the prophet and she was enamored with him, and they began this relationship, this affair. And as I said, both of their spouses were gone. What's really fascinating here is that she had two children, JJ and Tylee. And at the time she is with Chad Daybell, suddenly the children are missing. The children are gone. What we know now is that the children were killed and buried. And a lot of times what's interesting is that when there's a couple that's together and children go missing, sometimes it draws couples apart. It creates a problem. It creates a friction in the relationship, because there's heartbreak for the children, and there's arguments, or there's despair, there's depression, all these things that happen when your children go missing. And we've seen it tear apart people and tear apart relationships. In this case, though, again, focusing on the relationship between Chad and Lori, when JJ and Tylee, her children, go missing, they are now drawn closer together, and they end up getting married and going on their honeymoon while her kids are missing, ultimately found buried in his backyard. Unbelievable when you think about how this relationship developed. This is when they decide to get married, when her kids are totally out of the way. Now, when investigators were in Chad Daybell's backyard looking and digging up, Chad was a free man. Lori was in jail. But as investigators are digging up the bones and remains of JJ and Tylee, Chad is on the phone with Lori. Take a listen.
They're searching the property.
The house right now?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Mark means we'll be talking to you.
Okay. What, are they in the house?
No, they're out in the property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
They're searching. There's a search warrant, and so we're going to get in with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah, so you tried to set up a call, logical.
Yeah.
So you see what transpires.
Okay.
You don't
What do you want me to do? Pray.
What?
What do you want me to
Yeah, right. Well,
And you hear their little giggles at the end of that call. Thanks for calling. I'm so glad you called. You know, let's pray. They're still together. That relationship seems very tight at that moment when she's in jail and he is free. But he knows and she knows that they're digging up the backyard at that moment. Well, after they dig up the backyard and find the remains, now they're both locked up, both charged, implicated in the murders of her children, and now we're getting ready for a murder trial. So the question tonight is, where is that relationship now? Now that they've been separated, as they have their own legal teams, separate defenses, whatever it's going to be. We still don't know exactly what each one will say inside the courtroom. But I noticed something, and I think this is really, it could be telling, it might be nothing. But there was an appearance where Lori is in court. And we've done this all throughout the story. What's her name? Is it Lori Vallow, Lori Noreen Vallow, Lori Noreen Vallow Daybell, what's her name? What does she want to be called? She was asked by the judge. Take a listen to what she said.
The defendant is also present here in the courtroom. Counsel for defense, in the court pleadings, it designates Ms. Vallow, AKA Ms. Daybell. How would your client like to be referred to by the court?
Mrs. Daybell, please, Your Honor.
Right.
Mrs. Daybell. Mrs. Daybell, very specific, okay? Now, we just noticed yesterday in the courtroom, Chad Daybell's attorney has to refer to Lori, and it really jumped out to us here at Court TV when he was referring to Mrs. Daybell. Take a listen to what Chad's lawyer called Lori.
The two cases, as the court pointed out, were joined by this court. Subsequent to that, there was an order that put a stay on Miss Lori Noreen Vallow's case. I am not afforded the opportunity to get any information about the status of the Lori Noreen Vallow Daybell matter, and I don't have information as to what her status is.
First time, no Daybell. Second time, oh yeah, Daybell. You know, it's the lawyer, it's what the papers say. But what exactly is going on here? Because this hearing was about severance, okay? This hearing was about severance inside the courtroom. And the judge denied that motion. Take a look at what the judge determined, because Chad Daybell and his legal team, they don't want to be in the same courtroom with Lori Noreen Vallow Daybell. All right, the judge says, having determined that the defense has not met its burden to persuade the court that a jury is likely to confuse evidence in this case, that the defense will be unable to meaningfully present defenses, or that a jury is likely to base a guilty determination in this case due to the evidence of criminal disposition, the court must conclude that the case will not be severed. Further, the court concludes that a joint trial in this case will serve the interests of justice by providing for judicial economy and efficiency and avoiding possible inconsistent verdicts. Accordingly, defendant's motion for severance on this basis is denied. So Chad is trying to, it's Splitsville. Maybe not for the marriage, but for the trials, he's seeking Splitsville, but the judge has denied it, so they will be tried together, scheduled in January. But what's going on in this relationship really and how can it impact what happens inside the courtroom? Let's bring in our think tank to go through this. Joining us tonight in Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, and law professor at Texas Southern University, Michael Sterling. In Seattle, Washington, trial attorney Ann Bremner. And in West Palm Beach, Florida, former police lieutenant and trial attorney Rick King. Great to see everyone. To me, this whole case, this whole trial, this whole story, the murder of these two children is all grounded in the nature of this relationship between these two. But where does that relationship stand tonight? Where will it stand inside that courtroom? And Bremner, what do you think is going on here? Do you think that Chad and his team don't want Lori there because that's where they're pointing the finger? They don't want to be near her, and he's just out for himself at this point because he's not going into court saying it was all me.
No, and that's where he's always been. Goodbye doesn't mean forever. Maybe just goodbyes for the trial, right? And then they can figure it out afterward. But he's in it for himself. He's in it to win it, and he wants to distance himself. And frankly, there couldn't be any prejudice in basically trying these two together because she's found incompetent to stand trial, at least right now. But, you know, he's a very selfish guy. He's a prophet. And, you know, he's been able to basically bamboozle her, and she's still in that state, but he isn't.
Yeah, you know what, Michael Sterling, I know we've been covering this story for a long time. We've done a lot of segments on it. I just see it right now. It's becoming clearer and clearer to me the way this is going to play out. And I'd be interested in how you think that could impact verdicts in this case if Chad is going to separate himself from Lori and try to throw her under the bus as being the one responsible, solely responsible, perhaps with her dead brother, but responsible for the murder of her own children.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen, Vinny. Whether Chad wants it to happen or not, his lawyers have probably counseled and advised him that if you want a puncher.
Wait, stop on that point right there, Michael. That's an important point. That's an important point that you're making. Do you think that this severance and everything is driven solely by defense counsel, or do you think Chad is on board with it? And if Chad wants to be with Lori, does he get the final say on that, or is it up to his lawyer?
Well, I'll say that the defendant always gets the say in terms of what happens, but ordinarily what happens in the course of these proceedings is you follow the advice of the lawyers, the skilled and qualified lawyers you've hired to represent you, who inform you, advise, counsel, encourage, and let you know if you've got a chance of winning the case, here are the things you have to do. And so while he's likely on board with his lawyer's strategy, certainly he's been persuaded and counseled by his lawyers that your only opportunity for a victory is to follow my game plan. And so, yeah, while I think he's probably on board with it he's on board with it because the skilled lawyers who actually know what they're doing are the ones advising and counseling him in terms of what he needs to do to win.
Rick King, John Pryor, when he's inside that courtroom, there's something about his presence in the courtroom. He tends to just take it over. He's one of those types of defense attorneys. I've seen some extremely successful, like he has been throughout his career. But where do you think the relationship stands right now? They've been separated for quite some time now. Lori's been locked up for years. He's been locked up. They're in separate jails, obviously. They can't communicate. Do you think the absence is making the heart grow fonder, or is reality setting in that I've got to get myself out of here?
If you look back to the very beginning of this case, he put a spell on her in the beginning. And I think that she still remains very much underneath the spell of Chad Daybell. And I think Chad Daybell remains in love with or whatever they have together. Ultimately, Vinny, and I think you said this in the very beginning where we talked about it, they're going to point toward the open chair, both of them. I think both of them point toward the vacant chair left by her brother's death. And I think that's where they both point ultimately.
Yeah, he's dead. Alex Cox, the brother of Lori, Noreen, Vallow, Daybell. She had to be Lori Cox, I guess, at some point also.
I think
she had a lot of husbands. Go ahead, Michael.
Now, I'll say I agree with Rick. I think they'll throw everything against the wall. Whether if it's Chad, his lawyers are going to say whether you believe it was Lori, whether you believe it was Lori's brother, whoever you believe it wasn't Chad. And Lori will likely do the same thing. Lori's attorney, so on her behalf. So, you know, defense counsel has an obligation, an ethical obligation, and I think it's important for the Court TV audience to understand, to raise any specter of reasonable doubt. And so your obligation is to point to any potential alternative theory that cannot be excluded by the prosecution in order to raise reasonable doubt.
Yeah, and Alex Cox is in the middle of all of this. I mean, he's in the middle of all of it. We know for a fact that he shot and killed Lori's husband. We know for a fact that a prior husband of hers was, it was one of those like taser instruments that was applied to the lower midsection of her prior husband. He went to jail for that. So there was something to that relationship as well. Do you think that becomes the focal point of Chad Daybell's defense and trial? Is that you've got to focus on not the relationship between Chad Daybell and Lori, Noreen, Vallow, Cox, Ryan, Daybell, and you're going to focus on the brother-sister relationship.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Alex Cox the last one seen with the kids?
Yes, by Melanie Gibb, was carrying JJ. Ty Lee, they were all at the park together. But JJ, yeah, was being carried. Melanie Gibb will testify to that. I think that's where they're going, and I think that's going to be Chad Daybell's attempt to get out from under all of this, even though he is the prophet, and he's the prophet.
He's the prophet, but you know, I don't know why I keep thinking about Charles Manson. That's an old trial, but those girls, the Manson girls, remember, they just fell on their sword for him. He bamboozled everybody. Remember, they were singing and chanting and shaving their heads and on the corners in front of the courthouse and everything else. I mean, that was an amazing trial that basically they went hook, line, and sinker for, you know, the prophet.
All right, folks, this thing is happening. There's another hearing tomorrow we'll tell you all about. But the trial right now scheduled for January 2023 in Idaho. When we come back, Think Tank with us the whole hour, by the way. Michael Sterling, Ann Bremner, Rick King.